Hello everyone. Today is our second presentation and second Zoom session in our course Philosophy and the Baha'i Faith. This time we are going to discuss ontology or theory of reality, or we could call it metaphysics. As always, we will begin with some basic introductions. So what is ontology? Ontology is the branch of philosophy that asks the question, what is real? Or what is reality? Or what does really exist? In the history of philosophy, there were three types of ontological systems: monism, dualism, and pluralism. Philosophical monism is an ontological teaching that reduces the multiplicity of objects in the universe to one underlying principle. This principle could be God, Atman in Hinduism, Tao in Taoism, matter in materialism, and so on. Philosophical dualism rejects the metaphysical idea of singleness and asserts that everything in creation runs in pairs: spirit and matter in Western philosophy, yin and yang in Chinese philosophy, mind and body in modern philosophy, etc. Philosophical pluralism affirms the impossibility to reduce the variety of objects into anything single or dual. Now, from the perspective of the history of philosophy, Baha'i ontology, as is the case with various other theological and philosophical issues, in my view, offers a comprehensive and conciliatory approach by accommodating all types of ontological traditions. Baha'i ontology may be called relativistic. I'm not here talking about relativistic morality, which does not sound good. I'm calling Baha'i ontology relativistic in a way that it accommodates different types of ontologies. It begins with the affirmation about the irreducible nature of multiplicity. Everything in creation exists in its own right and on its own level. And that is the basic assumption of pluralism. There is no absolute non-existence in the world. And as Abdu'l-Baha puts it, I quote, "Absolute non-existence lacks the capacity to attain existence. If the universe were pure nothingness, existence could not have been realized," end quote. The lower forms of life, however, cannot comprehend the higher ones, and in comparison to them, lack existence. Sorry. As Abdu'l-Baha says, I quote, "For example, as this mineral belongs to the mineral kingdom, however far it may rise, it can never comprehend the power of growth. The plants and trees, however far they may progress, cannot imagine the powers of sight or of the other senses. The animal cannot imagine the human degree, that is, the spiritual powers," end quote. Hence, as Abdu'l-Baha concludes, no creature is ever capable of understanding the existence of God, since, I quote, "differences of degree are a barrier to knowledge. The inferior degree cannot comprehend the superior. How then can a reality which is originated comprehend that reality which has existed from all eternity?" End quote. That is why, in comparison to the Almighty, no part of creation could really claim true existence. And that is the main assumption of monism. So if we are talking about the absolute reality or the ultimate reality, we could say that only God truly exists. Now, according to the Baha'i teachings, God represents the sum of all perfections. He is the uncaused cause of everything that exists, and as such is essentially unknowable. Humans cannot comprehend divinity, but they could deduce its existence from the guidance of scriptures, from observation of nature, and from study of human history. The Baha'i writings provide an abundance of traditional and rational arguments for the existence of God, most of which are comparable to the famous 5 ways of Saint Thomas Aquinas, which is extensively studied in Catholicism. Since God is pre-existent and eternal, his creation, although having its ultimate cause in the deity itself, should also be infinite and ever existing. Abdu'l-Baha describes the relation between God and his creation as that of emanation. And here is another quotation from Abdu'l-Baha. Appearance through emanation is like the appearance of the rays from the sun. The sanctified essence of the Son of Truth cannot be divided or descend into the condition of the creation. In the same way, the sun does not divide itself or descend upon the earth, but its rays, the outpourings of its grace, emanate from it and illumine the dark bodies. End quote. Abdu'l-Baha continues. The first thing to emanate from God is that universal reality which the ancient philosophers termed the first intellect, and which the people of Baha call the primal will. End quote. God does not generate the world from his nature. He creates it through his will. As a result, the creaturely realm becomes essentially different from its creator. Now, as for the world of creation itself, Abdu'l-Baha divides it into 2 categories, matter and spirit. And here we come to the dualistic aspect of Baha'i philosophy. Material objects constitute a reality we call nature, which I quote from Abdu'l-Baha, outwardly is the source of the life and death, or in other words, of the composition and decomposition of all things, end quote. According to Abdu'l-Baha, another quote, this nature is subject to a sound organization, to inviolable laws, to a perfect order, and to a consummate design from which it never departs. To such an extent is this true that all things, from the smallest invisible atom to the largest globes, are most perfectly organized, be it with regard to their order, their composition, their outward form, or their motion, end quote. The spiritual realm, in its turn, is subdivided into 5 classes, the vegetative, animal, and human spirit, the spirit of faith, and the Holy Spirit. The vegetable spirit, which has the power of growth, and the animal spirit, which has the power of the senses, result, I quote, from the combination of elements that are brought together in a single composition. But after the separation and dissolution of these composed elements, those spirits with their powers will also naturally cease to exist, unquote. In contrast to them, the human spirit is eternal and continues its existence after the death of the body. But as Abdu'l-Baha notes, I quote, this human spirit has 2 aspects, one divine and one satanic. That is, it is capable of both the greatest perfection and the greatest deficiency. Should it acquire virtues, it is the noblest of all things, and should it acquire vices, it becomes the most vile, end quote. Finally, about the Holy Spirit, Abdu'l-Baha says, I quote, the heavenly spirit, which is the spirit of faith and the outpouring grace of the All-Merciful, is completed by the Holy Spirit, which is the mediator between God and his creation, end quote. And this is the end of my presentation. Now we are opening our floor to discussion.